Thank you for listening to the Conformed to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. I'm Jay Jones, and I'm here on a text-driven Tuesday with George Mays. Morning, George.
Hey.
How's it going?
Going all right.
Good.
Mowed my yard this morning, so I'm a little...
You got up early and mowed the yard.
Yep.
All right. That's a good option when it's about 100. Going to be 100 that day.
I know it.
Yep. All right. Well, it's Monday for us. Not Tuesday. Tuesday for the listener. George got a fresh night's sleep and freshly mowed grass, so he's ready to go.
I don't know about that.
Starting the week off right. I'm back after a short hiatus.
Do you want to talk about it?
Sure.
I can tell.
Had to miss church.
Yeah, I can tell.
I don't like missing church. Sitting at home all by myself. Didn't even have no family around. Nobody was even homesick with me.
Yeah.
All by myself, just watching the church on my tablet. These notes here were taken on my tablet while you were up on the screen. Got stung by a scorpion, George.
That does not sound pleasant.
It wasn't that bad. The sting wasn't that bad, but apparently it got infected, or I'm allergic. Maybe I'm really allergic, and it spread like rapidly on my thigh, like all the way down from my upper thigh down to my knee.
Yeah.
Quick.
Mm.
So had to go get some high-powered stuff from the doctors and lay around for like 24 hours. Got it under control.
Mm.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy to think about. I was talking to Larry about this and you a little bit. That, like, a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
that'd have been it for Jay Jones.
Right.
Either that or they'd have been
Which is wild. I mean,
whacking my leg off with a rusty saw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is, it's so bizarre. It was, just a little scorpion?
Yeah, we have what is it, Larry? A bark scorpion? Bark scorpion's like the only scorpion in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Right.
So I guess it's got, if you're a young person or an old person, they can be dangerous.
Okay.
But
hey, you're getting in that other category.
I don't know. I mean, I got hit by that tarantula hawk wasp.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Was that like maybe 4 years ago? That's like, literally riding lightning.
Right.
Like, not joking. I think it's the second worst insect sting on the planet. Tarantula hawk wasp. But the initial shock of it, like, after it goes away, it's uncomfortable for several hours. But then nothing. It did nothing to me.
Yeah.
Get stung by this little scorpion.
Little scorpion. See, that
doesn't make any sense.
See, I thought that when you got stung by a scorpion, it was an immediate pain.
Well, it was, yeah. It felt like I got stung by a bee or something.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting.
I think there's
like
degrees. I think there's
pain.
degrees of. I mean, it was like a little bee or a wasp or something, but after the hawk wasp, it was nothing. But then 48 hours later, man, like, what in the world's going on here?
I mean, that's the only thing worse than a spider, Jay, is a spider with
claws,
2 claws and a stinger.
Pinchers,
yeah.
Exoskeleton.
Uh-huh.
You can't kill them. You like step on them, it does nothing.
Yeah.
You got to take out the plumber's torch and torch them. That's how we get them at my house. Yeah.
Okay. Do you see them very often? I mean, you're out in the in the country.
We see a couple. We see a couple a year.
Do you?
Usually, yeah. Out walking across the concrete, or I don't know whether they eat like ants or something. We got plenty of ants out of our house.
I haven't seen any at our house in several years. Now, watch, I'll start seeing them. Now that I say that,
you'll probably see one.
Yeah.
They're pretty shy though.
Yeah, but when we lived in Meeker, Oklahoma, which is a little bit north of Shawnee, we saw them all the time in the parsonage, all the time. And there's nothing worse than you're watching TV and you see something
crawling.
crawling out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah. But it's good to be back. So let's jump in, and we'll look at your sermon. I don't know what the sermon title was because I didn't have a bulletin. But the sermon was all about hope, and it comes off the tail end of this big warning that we have been looking at for the past several weeks. And this is all about hope. And your two main points were, well, I would say that was your purpose, to instill hope.
Mm-hmm.
You said the purpose was that we would have hope and hope in God. So your first point was Abraham's double sure hope, and then the second point was our double sure hope.
Mm-hmm.
So easy to remember.
Right.
Abraham's double sure hope, then our double sure hope. So let's jump in here. I want to have you read it.
Are you remembering this sermon a little bit better than you did last week?
Yeah, I am.
Since it's not, you don't have a day in
I
between.
don't have a day. There's no gap.
Okay.
No time.
So what you're saying is that you remember the sermon better having stayed at home with a bad scorpion sting
Right.
than sleeping for 24 hours.
But there is not the extra gap.
I gotcha.
I haven't put in all the information.
Okay.
When we leave here, I will go read. And as I read and prepare stuff for my next sermon series on Ecclesiastes, all of your sermon stuff will go out.
I gotcha.
But it'll stay in the soul. There's only so much room in here, George. I only have so much capacity left in the brain.
All right. You got me there, Jay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Mind engaged. It moves to heart affected,
Okay.
and then the mind gets new information.
Okay.
That's all I got left at 41 years old.
I gotcha. Okay.
And it's going down even worse, like as the years go by.
Oh yeah.
The amount that stays in there.
Oh, definitely.
So I have super respect for old dudes like R.C. Sproul, who apparently still didn't use sermon notes when they were right before they died, and they could just tell you anything.
Wow.
And all the historical figures, and yeah, that's not me.
Nope.
Not me. So we work with what we got. You got to work with what God gave you.
Yep.
But I got the sermon in there right now, so
Okay.
let's go ahead. Let's jump in here. Tell us about it coming off of the warning. What is the author of Hebrews doing now?
Well, you've got that. So beginning in chapter 5, verse 11, he's starting to explain how he wants to tell him about Melchizedek, about Christ's Melchizedekian priesthood.
You make a word up?
I'm going to have to go back and look in commentaries. I know I didn't make that word up. But my wife and Philip both were making fun of me yesterday
For making a word?
for saying that. Philip, I guess, was impressed by the word, but he didn't think it was a real word.
You better TM that and put it on a T-shirt.
Look, you got Levitical priesthood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Levites, Levitical.
Yeah.
And now you got Melchizedekian.
Makes sense.
I don't know. I know I didn't make that up, but
So-
I'll have to find some commentary and drop a name. I'm hoping that I found it in like Calvin. I'm hoping I can break out Calvin and be like, look, Calvin said Melchizedekian.
We'll go one more. Okay. He's made us a kingdom of priests.
Mm-hmm.
What order are we?
Christian? I don't know. What are you getting at?
Christian priesthood?
Christian priesthood.
Jesusian?
Okay. All right. I guess.
Huh?
I'm going with Melchizedekian.
Could
I
be
don't know.
once removed.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
All right, let's jump in.
I mean, I'm going to be using that word, so if it's made up,
I don't know.
I don't think I coined it.
You use it.
That
communicates.
seems way beyond the scope of my brain.
It's good.
to
It's
make
a good
something
word. I like it.
Like that up. So he wants to explain to them how Christ is this fulfillment of Melchizedek's priesthood, and so he can't because they become dull of hearing.
Right.
They are content with shallow elementary Christianity, and so they don't want to dive into these theological ideas.
When are you going to explain Melchizedek? Next time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask you about it then.
Okay. Yeah. Well, chapter 7, we'll look at the story of Melchizedek. So he gives the warning, the strong warning, because the shallow, immature Christianity is fraught with peril, because when trials come, when temptation comes, you are in danger of falling away. So he's warning them not to fall away. And then last time, verses 9 through 12, we looked at this encouragement for them. He is sure of better things for them. He's sure that they will listen, they won't fall away, and that they will be imitators. So they will have this earnestness to pursue a full assurance of hope, of this hope, so that they won't be sluggish, but they'll be imitators of those who, through patience, inherit the promises.
Okay.
But maybe you're still doubting. Maybe you're still wavering. Maybe that's not that assurance is good, but you need more. So he's going to give them more. So how can you have this hope? How can you be so sure of Jesus? How can you be so sure that Jesus will save you?
Yeah.
That he truly is the better priest.
Better priest, yeah.
And so we have verses 13 through 20, which again is giving us this hope. It's giving us reason for this hope so that we'll hold on to the hope.
All right, so then we're going to jump into that, but let's have you read it first. Okay. Where are you going to start?
Let's start at verse 11.
Chapter 6, verse 11.
Yeah, because even though there's that break there, I think it's a good break right there. But it's still connected, and you'll see the connection with the words that are used at the end of verse 12. So we'll start at verse 11. It says, "And we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness, to have the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, 'Surely I will bless you and multiply you.' And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek."
All right. Good stuff. All right, let's look at this first point then in verses 13 through 16. If you're following along at home or riding, just go ahead and keep driving. Don't pull the Bible out. We're looking at Abraham's double sure hope. Abraham's double sure hope. So the question is that you raised, which I think is good. It's always a good idea when you're preaching, I think, to raise some questions. Why the example of Abraham?
I think there's probably many different reasons we could give, but I think the main ones are he's kind of the penultimate example of the man of faith. Paul uses him. James uses him. This isn't even the last time that the writer of Hebrews will use him. He is the father of faith. You go back to Genesis 15. He believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He's the example of justification by faith alone, right?
Yeah.
I think also because he's connected to Melchizedek. So we're going to be talking about Melchizedek. Abraham he's that connection because he's the one who interacts with Melchizedek. But I think also we could look at the fact that the place that he's quoting from here in verse 14 is from Genesis 22, the sacrifice of Isaac. He is taking him to Mount Moriah, and he's going to sacrifice his his only son, the son that he loves. The Greek translation is his only begotten son. And he receives him back from the dead. And I think there's, connection there because Isaac is a type of Christ. Christ fulfills this story. And that's what makes him the Melchizedekian priest. Is he's the one who lives forever.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of different connections, but I think the main ones are he is the one that the biblical authors go to when talking about faith.
Right.
And also his connection with Melchizedek.
Yeah. All right. So we go back to the Bible. God calls Abraham. So we'll just break it down to make it as easy as possible to get. God calls Abraham from a foreign land, a pagan nation. We forget that sometimes, that Abraham was a pagan.
Yeah, he's an idol worshiper according to Joshua. Joshua explicitly says they worshipped idols.
Yeah, living in, I guess it would be modern day Iraq, somewhere in that region, close to Iran, maybe.
Yeah, it's it's Ur of the Chaldeans, so it's Babylon.
Yeah,
like it's ancient Babylonia.
Yeah. All right, and there God comes to him, and he gives him nothing except a promise.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah, go to the place I'll show you.
Yeah.
And I'll make you a nation.
Uh-huh.
And I'll give you land, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through you. And it's amazing. Abraham goes.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the effectual call, right?
Right.
Like irresistible grace.
Uh-huh.
God tells you to go, and you go.
Yeah, the faith is the way it operates. It's interesting, right? Because this is not like an unoccupied place.
Right.
He's going to a place that already has people.
Right.
And God is just continuing to grow Abraham's influence and wealth and power. I mean, by the time he interacts with Melchizedek, he's got apparently an army enough to have an army.
Oh yeah. He's able to fight a war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's banking all of it on nothing but what God has said.
Right.
And so he is the prototypical man who simply believes God, takes him at his word, and God counts him as righteous. That's the whole point of Romans. I think it's start in chapter 5 or 4. Where does that line? I can't remember exactly where it is.
Which book?
Romans.
Romans chapter 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's that whole section he's elaborates on, and he uses Abraham.
Right.
And then here, the author of Hebrews tries to show you what he is banking that promise in.
Yeah.
And it comes down to this idea of swearing or making an oath.
Right.
So let's talk about making oaths.
Okay.
Because I liked your introduction.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I like that. A little historical information.
Right.
You brought up the idea of swearing. Like,
right.
Who hasn't made a promise to somebody, like I swear I'll do it, or whatever. And then you brought up the pinky
swear. Right.
It's like a little kid thing nowadays.
Right.
But apparently not always a pinky.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently not.
Was this like part of the samurai code or what?
Well, I looked at a bunch of different sites to make sure this wasn't like one person's opinion. And several of them brought up this might have been created by the Yakuza, the Japanese mob. Which it sounds like something that the Yakuza would do.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, when did the Yakuza, when did they start?
Probably at the fall of the empire.
I don't know, because the pinky swear, it dates back to at least 1860 in America.
So before that.
And they're pretty sure that it didn't originate in America. It originated, most of the places I looked said Japan. So it had to have been somewhere before 1860. So somewhere in the 17th or 18th centuries, the pinky swear originated. But it's called Yubakiri. I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize. Which means finger cut off. which
I love the literal translation.
I think that the listeners can kind of see where this is going. Right. Apparently, it was so you'd hook the pinky, and it was accompanied by a vow, which translated means it says pinky swear 10,000 punches. Whoever lies will be made to swallow 1,000 needles. So, and the whole point is if you break your oath, you have to cut off your pinky.
Yeah. Interesting.
The American version, it shows up in Bartlett's Dictionary of Americanisms, which Bartlett's is just it's a big book of different sayings and lines from books and things like that. So in 1860, it shows up in Bartlett's, and it says, "Pinky, pinky, bowbell. Whoever tells a lie will sink down to a bad place and never rise up again."
It doesn't actually say the place?
No, it says to a bad place and never rise again. I think that's part of like it sounds like a little kids thing, pinky, pinky, bowbell. Whoever tells a lie will sink down to a bad place and never rise again, instead of saying the bad place.
Interesting.
So anyway, that's there's a little bit of history for you, Jay. The pinky swear. But the point is, you see that it is a serious thing to make a promise. Like you said, it's kind of a kid's thing nowadays, the pinky swear.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it wasn't always that way. There's some other cultures that have something similar to that, and it's got kind of the same meaning of cutting off a finger or breaking a finger if you break your promise. I think I don't want to like chase a rabbit too far, but I think a lot of Christians, they hear this idea of taking an oath or swearing something, and they say, "Well, we're not supposed to swear by anything,"
right?
Based on Matthew chapter 5, that your yes be yes,
right.
Let your no be no. And so the Anabaptist back in these were the radical reformers back in the 17th century. They would not take oaths. They would not swear based on that. And so that was something that, so if you look at like the Westminster or the 1689, there's actually a chapter on
oaths,
lawful vows, because the reformers are arguing, now you're misunderstanding what Jesus is getting at. The Bible does allow for oath taking, for swearing. You see it all throughout the scriptures, not just in the Old Testament. You see it a little bit in the New Testament. Also, Paul takes
Nazarite vow.
Takes the vow. So you see vows. So we want to.
I think what Jesus more is getting at is kind of what you'd see him talking with the hypocrites about in Matthew 23. Like they play these stupid games.
Yeah.
Well, I swear by the gold on the altar.
Right.
Well, I swear by the gift on the altar.
Yeah.
And he's like,
it's like, well, it's. I think he's pushing against this idea that it's kind of like crossing your fingers behind your back.
Right.
Hey, you can't break your promise. You swore by the altar. Well, I didn't swear by the gold on the altar.
Right. Exactly.
Right. That's what Jesus is getting at.
Yeah. But if you make an oath to someone and it is you're taking it under God,
right?
Like you're swearing to God,
right? The most common oath in the Old Testament is "As the Lord lives."
As the Lord lives.
Yahweh
That's
lives.
taking an oath.
You listen to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. I don't want to jump into Ecclesiastes too soon for you, Jay, but it is it's relevant. It says, "Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God." An oath.
That's an oath.
Yeah. For God is in heaven and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. For a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one you must fear. So it doesn't say don't take a vow. It says think real long and hard before you take a vow, because it's a serious thing.
Two that you brought one up that I was thinking of in the sermon, and then there's another you didn't. We take this oath. We take an oath, military oath. At the end of the military oath, it's "So help me God."
Right. Yeah. Same with it's same with elected officials, president. He does the same thing.
Yeah. So you take an oath before God, but marriage is another oath. Marriage is an oath before God as well.
Right.
You're entering into a covenant with each other. God's part of this covenant.
Right.
And you're swearing.
At least Christian marriages. Yeah. I mean, you can go to justice of the peace, and you're not. You still are, but it's not explicitly.
Yeah, I mean, it's secular.
Right.
It's legally binding for like whatever tax paying and, but a Christian marriage, an oath before God.
Right.
Serious. We'd say unbreakable, only by a few exceptions in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, when you say "till death do us part," you are saying, "May I die before this oath is broken."
Yeah. One good example I kind of think of when I think about my grandma. My grandpa, I guess, was not a good husband when he came back from World War II. His generation, they all went over there very young, and he wasn't a great husband. He wasn't affectionate. I think he drank a lot, went to bars a lot, left her alone a lot often. I don't think he was affectionate to any of my, very affectionate to my mom or her sisters. And I'm pretty sure my grandma wanted to leave him and divorce him. She didn't do it. She stayed with him. And I think by the end of my grandpa's life, I don't have any doubts that he was a Christian. So, I mean, but these are the things that I've talked to you about it before. Like women today, like maybe their husband comes back from war. He's different. He's not a good husband, and they just leave him.
Yeah,
they just abandon him. You know what I mean? Like when you make it, or men, like they do.
I think men do it too. Your wife has a bunch of kids.
Gets older.
She's getting older. She's and then it's not like you're in high school or college anymore.
And they leave them, and then they get the younger. They go for a younger girl. They get the upgrade. Yeah, we don't do that in the Christian Christian world. Like your oath before God means something. It displays the gospel. But we have nothing greater to swear by. We swear by God.
Right.
Here he is, he's bringing up, author of Hebrew brings up Abraham, and he says, God wants to make this hope sure, and he gives him a promise.
Right.
Well, what can he give him beyond a promise? An oath. And what could he swear by?
Right.
What can God swear by? He can't swear by anything greater.
Yeah.
There's nothing greater than himself.
Yeah.
So he swears by himself.
Yeah. And this is Genesis 22. Abraham has just been obedient to sacrifice Isaac. The angel of the Lord stops him. And he tells him that by myself I've sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. That's what is in the mind of the writer here in Hebrews 6. By myself I have sworn. So he's swearing by himself, because the author of Hebrews mentions he doesn't have anyone else to swear by. So when we're swearing by God, we're saying God is bearing witness to this oath, and God will also carry out justice against the oath breaker. So if God is swearing by himself, he's saying, if I don't fulfill this, may my divinity be...
Well, let's make it more explicit. Tell us, I already know the answer. Who is it that appears before Abraham? And what he does is he flays open some animals.
Genesis 15.
And he goes in between them.
Right.
But who is it though? That's what because I think I know that you know, because we like to talk about this stuff. But who is the person present who comes to Abraham?
It's Christ. It's the second person of the Trinity.
How do you know that? God.
How do I know it? Which are we?
Keep it short.
Are we looking at Genesis 15?
Let's keep it short.
Okay. Genesis 15, it says that the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision.
Is the word of the Lord.
Last time I thought about it, a vision is something you see. So how does a word come to someone in a vision? How do you see it? So it's a person that's being called the word of the Lord. That's picked up in the New Testament, right? A couple of verses later, it says he takes him outside. So now it's explicit. The word is not, he's not just hearing a voice, he's seeing someone who takes him outside. And who, no one has seen God the Father. That's explicit throughout the Bible. You can't see the Father without the intermediary. And who is the one who reveals the Father? It's the Son. And that's true in the New Testament and in the Old Testament. So whenever the saints of the Old Testament, they see God,
or they're talking to someone,
or they're talking to someone who
looks like a man
and is talking as God, like the angel of the Lord in Genesis 22, by myself I have sworn. He is talking as God. It's Christ. It's the second person of the Trinity,
but not in flesh as he will be.
Not incarnate. He hasn't been incarnate. He appears as a man. Now,
how does that work?
We don't know how that works. We don't know how the angels take on physical form, in Genesis 18, and they eat food, and we don't know. Like that's beyond the scope of the scriptures. But we know there is a difference between them looking like a human and actually being incarnate, being actually made a human. So that there's a difference, a massive difference, apparently. I mean, the incarnation is, it's just completely different. But it's Christ who is swearing by himself that I will do this.
And if I break my oath, I'll die. Right.
Now,
so
I didn't bring...
he can't die.
Right.
He can't be torn apart.
Yeah, so I think that Genesis 15 and Genesis 22, I think that we can understand them together, but I think that what the author of Hebrews is doing is that he's looking more at the divinity of God's deity.
Right.
So God is saying that I would have to cease to be God in order for this to happen.
An impossibility.
I think in Genesis 15, there's when the covenant is cut the animals.
Yeah.
And Abraham's in a deep sleep, and he sees the torch and the fire pot passing through the pieces, which I love how the book Angel of the Lord describes that. It says this is not a Disney cartoon where you've got like these inanimate objects walking through. There's someone carrying them. Abraham just can't see who it is. It's Jesus walking through the pieces, and he's taking on both sides of the covenant. So as God, he's going to keep his promise. As Abraham's representative, if Abraham's children don't keep the covenant, they don't.
Right.
May I die. May I die. And so Jesus takes on the it's called a self-maledictory oath. May I die if this happens. And Abraham's offspring,
they don't keep
it. and so Jesus dies. Right? He seals the death, his own death, in that covenant cutting ceremony. But I think in Genesis 22, what's going on is in my deity, may I cease to be God if I don't fulfill this. Yeah. Which is
an impossibility.
God can't die. Right. In his divinity, he can't cease to be God, and so he gives his promise, but then he seals it with an oath, and it's an oath that
is unbreakable. It can't be broken.
Right. And so Abraham, patiently waiting, he obtains the promise. I mean, this is massive because God doesn't have to do this. Like, this is not something that God has to do. He's not bound by anything because he doesn't swear by anything greater than himself. So he takes this upon himself to make the promise to Abraham doubly sure by taking this oath and saying, look, not only am I saying this promise, but I'm going to swear that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it in such a way that you know that this is a certainty.
Abraham has this incredible source of hope. It plays out. You can see it in the binding of Isaac, right?
Yeah.
What does he tell the servants when he goes up the hill?
Yeah, well, me and the boy will go up, and we'll come down. We'll come down again.
People often forget this part.
Yeah.
what passage am I thinking of? I think even, or could it just be our speculation, but I think it's in the New Testament that he could have even risen. He could have brought him back.
It's Hebrews 11.
Yeah, okay.
He believes that
That he could have brought him back.
God could bring him back from the dead.
Yes.
He could raise him from the dead. And in a sense, he did receive him back from the dead, is what
Right.
the next verse says.
Because he believes that God's promises rest in this son that he's given him.
Right.
And he knows
So
God,
this is not just about Isaac, though it definitely is about Isaac because he loves Isaac. It's the son that he's been waiting for 25 years. 25 years, wandering around as a nomad, living in tents, experiencing trials, and I mean, he goes to war, and I mean, there's all kinds of conflict, and all this time he's waiting. 25 years. Here's the son. Go kill him. And this is not just Isaac that's going to die. It's
the
all
promise.
All the promises. All the promises are going to die because God said it will come through Isaac. And yet he goes and does it because he believes God's word. He believes God is faithful. God is going to do this. And me and the boy will go up, and me and the boy are going to come back down.
The test is, do you believe my promise? Now, it's hard for us to grapple with that test.
It's even more explicit. It's, do you believe my word?
Yeah.
I mean, this has massive connections with Genesis 3, where the serpent comes and he's making Eve and Adam question God's word. Is God good? He's holding stuff back from you. Here's Abraham. God has given him the promise, and now God's going to take it away, and he's experiencing the same temptations. Is God good? Is God's word going to be true? And Abraham has to make kind of the same decision that Adam and Eve have to make, and he's obedient.
Yeah. So Abraham's source of hope is God's promise, made even more sure by God's oath. There's nothing greater God could swear by. That's the double sure hope of Abraham, and he's calling them to mimic that.
Right.
That's what the writer of Hebrews is doing.
Yeah, there's connections between verses 11 and 12 and 13 through 16. Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. You're supposed to be imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. That's the whole point. He's not just bringing up Abraham randomly. He's saying, mimic him, be like him. See how Abraham lived. Consider that he was given promises. He had to wait. Over 25 years, like as we're reading it, it seems like God is speaking to Abraham in every chapter, and we kind of have this sense that God is just always speaking to Abraham, but we forget 25 years. There's probably periods of silence. There's probably times when Abraham is just going about his everyday life, and he doesn't hear from God. He has to just keep. I mean, he could go back to Ur of the Chaldeans. He could go back to where his family is. But he doesn't. He stays there. He is a stranger in the land. He wanders around. He has to deal with he lives in a fallen world. He has to live with the circumstances of this world, surrounded by pagans, and he obeys. That sounds a lot like what Christians have to deal with. They've been given the promises. We go through our lives. We're surrounded by pagans. We have to deal with just the circumstances of a fallen world. It doesn't always look like God is doing anything. We're waiting. We're waiting for the promises to come to fruition. We and Abraham have a lot in common, even though we're separated by some 4,000 years. We still have a lot in common with Abraham, and the author is telling us, mimic him.
So then he moves into that we have a double sure hope in 17 through 20. So the question is raised, who are the heirs of the promise of Abraham? In you all nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Right? Who are the heirs, the benefits of these promises?
Yeah. It's Christians. We see that in Galatians chapter 3, verse 29. If you are Christ, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise.
Okay, so we become heirs of the promise. So does this mean, in some sense, then the promises made to Abraham are our promises as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So the promise goes through Isaac, Jacob, to the 12 tribes, and they come to fruition in Christ. And then those who are, and Christ is he is the promised son. He is the offspring through whom all the nations will be blessed. And if we belong to Christ, then we are brought into that family. We become Abraham's offspring. We are the ones who inherit the promises through Christ. And so we have the same promises.
This is the language of verse 17, if you're listening. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his promise, he guaranteed it with an oath. So what kind of promises are like the recipients of the book of Hebrews, and then we can translate this into our time? What promises have they been given that they have not yet seen, and how is that related to him using Abraham and helping them to persevere?
Oh, well, I mean, you look back to the initial promise. God promised that all the nations of the earth would be blessed. That God would bless those who bless Abraham, curse those who curse him. So it seems like Abraham and his offspring are exalted, like they're not looked down upon, but they're honored. You got these Christians who are not feeling that way,
Right.
It's a reversal of Genesis 3, the curses. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to experience new heavens, new earth, restoration of all things, end of sin, end of the devil, actually seeing the Messiah reigning. He actually rules, the nations submit to him. All of those things are promises that are given to Abraham's offspring,
Mm-hmm.
to the heirs of the promise.
Yeah.
And yet they don't see it yet.
Well, you said after 25 years he waited.
Right.
And you said, how about after thousands of years
Yeah.
of waiting? How can we be sure after thousands of years
Yeah.
of waiting that this will happen?
Yeah. I mean, we've been waiting since the coming of Christ.
Mhm.
Christ died. He rose from the dead. He has ascended to the right hand of the Father, and it's been almost 2,000 years. We're still waiting. Now the gospel has gone forth. The gospel is making an impact. People are coming to faith in Christ. The nations are being discipled, but yet, I mean, look at the world. Look at the world. Hostile to Christianity, just chaos. We're still experiencing the effects of the fall. Christians are not honored.
Mm-hmm.
They're looked down upon. They're maligned. We're called bigots and homophobes and, white supremacists.
Right.
Christian nationalists, even people that profess to be Christians, they make it a profession to criticize the church.
Uh-huh.
Are the promises still true? You've got the Christians that he's writing to here in the first century that are having their property confiscated. They're being persecuted. They're being thrown into jail. Are the promises going to be true? Are we going to experience the blessings, or are we just the world's punching bags?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be easier to just go back to Judaism? Just go back to the temple, the animal sacrifice, the priesthood. We're still worshiping Yahweh according to the Old Testament, and it's a recognized religion.
Right.
We're not really being threatened with, jail time for being Jewish.
Yeah. When they bring her around the little bust of Caesar
Yeah,
and they tell you to
just
kneel, all
little-
you have to say is, well, I'm Jewish, because they had exceptions
right, right.
for them that they didn't have to do that.
But even if you didn't want to go back to Judaism, like try out some other religion, and
Yeah.
just a little pinch of incense to the bust of the emperor, and
Yeah.
go, worship Artemis.
Right.
I mean, why go through all of this? What's the point? Is there any hope that this actually is true? It's a question that we're all going to face.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to face when you're faced with some pink-haired it thing that's telling you that you're a bigot because you won't refer to them as Zim.
Yeah, Zim. Zim. Went from they them to Zim.
Just because you're a Christian.
Sounds like a Zoolander thing.
Maybe it would, maybe it'd just be easier to just go along with it. I mean, we're all going to face this at some point.
Yeah. So, what does God give? He gives his oath. And then the author of Hebrews brings up something interesting, maybe people haven't really thought about very much, that it's impossible for God to do some things. God's given you an oath. There's nothing greater to swear by. And, by the way, it's impossible for God to lie. When was the first time you kind of started to think about the idea that there are things God can't do? Remember when you ever first encountered those things?
Goodness, it had to have been once I was an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you are taught, God can't lie, God is good, but you don't really think about this
why?
is an all-powerful being, and there are things that he can't do. The Bible explicitly says that he can't do. I think the first time I really started thinking about it was more along the lines of philosophical arguments. The atheist. I don't know if they, the common atheist would bring this up, but can God make a boulder that he can't lift?
Right.
This seeming conundrum.
Right.
Things like that. That's when I started thinking more deeply about the fact that there are things that God can't do. And that's not a weakness. It's he can only do things that are in accord with his character, with his nature.
Right. So God's character, nature, this is what gets to the things that God can do. Even gets into the boulder thing. And it gets to lying. But God is perfection. That's what he is in his nature, in every aspect.
Yeah.
God is, I'm not saying that God is logic, but God's very nature is perfectly logical.
Well, where do the laws of logic come from? They're not they don't just pop into existence. They have a source. Yeah. So the whole reason that we can think logically is because there's a God
who thinks
logically
and can't do illogical things.
Right.
So God can do anything that's not illogical. Like God can't make a boulder too big for him to lift.
Right.
Because that is a nonsense statement.
Yeah, so it's illogical.
It's like saying, can God make a square circle?
Right.
Well, no, because they can't exist.
Yeah, a square by its nature is a square. A circle is by its nature a circle.
Right. So God doesn't do contradictory things.
Right.
He can't make a married bachelor.
This is why the whole argument of there are some times when 2 + 2 can equal 5. It's trying to get around the way that God has created the world. Like
God
2
structured
+
the
2
universe.
equals 4, because that is just the truth of it.
Right.
To try to get around that is to try to subvert God's creation. It's trying to subvert who God is.
Well, you can't get around it without like renaming things.
Right.
Like you have 2 objects here, you've got 2 objects here, put them together, you've got 4 objects.
Right.
Unless you want to rename one of them 3.
Yeah.
But these are nonsense things. So another nonsense thing would be God lying.
Right.
He can't do it. It's actually impossible because he's perfection.
Right. And he can't do it because he doesn't want to do it. Like it's not in his nature.
Right.
He is truth.
Yes.
He does not tell lies because it's not even like it's an impossibility. It's not just well, there's no scenario I can think of where God might be tempted to lie. God can't be tempted. He can't be tempted. So he's not going to be tempted to lie. So it's impossible. It's outside the realm of possibility that God could do something like this because it's outside of his nature.
Right.
So he's not going to do something that is contrary to who he is.
And this is why the 10 Commandments are not arbitrary laws.
Right.
People debate these things like ethics. Well, are the 10 Commandments, are they good because God gave them?
Mm-hmm.
Or did God give them because they're good?
Yeah.
And what makes them good? Well, if they're good just because God gave a set of laws, then God could have gave a different set of laws and called them good.
Right.
But that's not how they originate. They come out of his grounding of being.
Mm-hmm.
So he is good. And what does he give you? He gives you laws, which in a way are expressions of his nature. So one great example is I've got a 3-year-old. What do 3-year-olds do, George, without being taught? It's one of the 10 Commandments. What do they violate? Like you see it quick. Like they lie.
Right.
Kids lie. Little kids lie. A shocker to people who haven't had parents yet. You don't have to teach your kids to lie. They may have never observed a single lie in their life. They're going to lie to you.
Mm.
Well, when you teach your kids to lie, what do you tell them? Hey, God said don't lie. God, it's a bad thing. That's one way to do it. Or you could say, we don't lie because it's impossible for God to lie. And when we are honest, we are being like God. And to lie is to not be like God. And God wants us to have a good life. How do we have a good life? We be honest. So society can't work with a society of a whole bunch of liars running around just lying and scheming each other, which is kind of
things seem to be going all right.
right. Yeah, things are going great in the world, aren't they, George? People are so honest. Yeah, but these emerge from the grounding of his being,
Right.
And God. And we're kind of like exhausting it because hopefully people can get it. If God tells you something, it's true.
Right.
You don't have to second guess him.
Yeah. And so that's what makes this statement so massive. When he wants to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, so he doesn't change his mind either. That's another thing he doesn't do. He doesn't change.
Yeah.
So his purpose that he gave to Abraham is the same that he gives to us. We may be separated by millennia, but God doesn't change, and so we know that his same will is in motion right now. He guaranteed it with an oath. So he gave a promise. You can trust it because God doesn't lie. But on top of that, he gives his oath.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He gives his oath. And who does he swear that oath by? He swears it by himself. And I think that the promise and the oath is Psalm 110, where God swears and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah.
So how do we know that Jesus actually saves, that he actually is this, there's that word again, Melchizedekian priest? How can we be so sure? Because of two unchangeable things, God's promise and God's oath.
Uh-huh.
And he cannot lie.
Right.
And so Jesus is this Melchizedekian priest.
So tie it into Psalm 110.
I think I just did, Shay.
Well, make it explicit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Make it more. Maybe read the section.
Okay. So Yahweh. Mm-hmm. So Yahweh says to my Lord, to Adonai. So this is David. Jesus makes this explicit in Matthew 22, 21.
Yeah, when he's stomping them.
Yeah. Who's David talking about?
I don't know.
Well, this was already interpreted as messianic. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, they already knew, like, this is messianic. Well, David calls him Lord. How could it be Lord and his offspring? They don't understand, like, the deity of the Messiah. So Yahweh says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. There's a promise, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours. Lots of promises there. The reign of the Messiah, the victory of the Messiah, the redemption of people who will actually come to him. All of these promises. And then verse 4, Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
There it is.
So he gives all these promises to the Messiah,
Mm-hmm.
and then he swears it with an oath.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesus receives the same
same
kind of
oath.
promise
Yeah.
that Abraham
Yeah.
receives. And through him, we have it too.
Mm-hmm.
We have the promises that Jesus will reign, that his people will reign with him. And God has made it doubly sure by on top of that, swearing.
Yeah. All right. Talk about verse 19 and 20 briefly, if you can. I think it's just a picture. It's a beautiful picture of hope. A metaphor. You ever see people with a little anchor tattoo?
Not in a long time.
You haven't?
Not in a long time. Is that just a Navy thing?
Well, I'm talking about Christians.
Oh, Christians. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, are you one of those that thinks
don't-
Christians don't get tattoos?
Is
that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I've never seen a Christian that was like, yeah, give me an anchor.
Give me
give me the anchor.
Give me the anchor. You know the one. What, you mean the Navy one? No, I don't mean the Navy one, man. Come on, tattoo guy. Don't you know I'm talking about Hebrews 6:19? Don't you know this?
I've never seen a Christian that has an anchor tattoo, but
maybe I'll have to change that.
have you? Please do.
Huh? Maybe I'm going to change that for you, George.
All right, Popeye. Have you seen someone with an anchor
Actually, I have.
tattoo?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Okay.
Tim Matzke's got one.
Really?
I think so. I think it's an anchor, maybe a ship. I think it's an anchor though.
Well, he listens to this, so he can.
I'm pretty sure he's got an anchor
He can.
tattoo.
He can verify.
I think I
can
might have to
verify
get
that.
one, George, right here on the left
Gonna
pec.
get-
I like it. I like this verse. You could
Yeah.
get up in the morning and look
Uh-huh.
in the mirror and
Okay.
see here. Get an anchor
You'd have to have it tattooed
for my
backwards
soul.
if you're going to look
an
in
anchor
the,
for my soul. Yeah, tattoo it backwards. I need to read it every day. A sure and steady anchor
Right.
for our soul
Right.
beyond the veil,
Yes.
In
Behind the curtain,
behind the curtain,
where
Chri-
Jesus is.
where Jesus is,
Right.
Christ.
Yeah. It's. I mean, everyone knows what an anchor is.
Mhm.
Right. You drop anchor. It.
You're not moving.
Right. It latches onto the bed of whatever the body of water is, hooks on a rock or something, and the boat doesn't move.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't go with the current. The wind can't blow it. Even if there's storms, the boat's going to be rocked back and forth, but it's not going to move as long as it's anchored. Right?
Mhm.
You see that at the end of Acts with Paul in the boat. They're being tossed about by the storm, and they drop anchor at some point so that they're not just blown everywhere. But what's interesting, I love this. This was in Calvin. It was in a bunch of, I think every commentary I looked at made mention of this, but it all goes back to Calvin. We talked about that before. Like there's
They
not
all
really,
steal. Everybody steals
they all
from
steal
him.
from Calvin. Yeah. That whereas in a boat, the anchor is thrust down into the water. For the Christian, our anchor is thrust upward into the heavens. And what's it latched onto, Jay? What is our anchor latched onto? What do you think?
Christ
See, I think that's what,
or the promise.
I think what a lot of people think is it's Christ, but I think that the picture, if you recognize how he's kind of going back to the end of chapter 4,
The high priesthood?
when we can approach the throne of grace with confidence. I think the anchor is supposed to. The picture is that it's latched onto the throne of God.
Okay. How about the throne Jesus is sitting on?
That could be
Which
this.
one?
Well, I mean, the throne of grace.
There you go.
You can approach God the Father. That's the
Yeah.
whole point. Is behind the curtain, in the inner place, behind the curtain. You would think that was all over the place in the Bible, wouldn't you? Apparently, it's only in Leviticus 16:2. That's the only place where that exact phrase is used in the Greek translation, and it's in relation to the high priest going
beyond the curtain
into the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement.
where the Ark of the Covenant
so
is.
Christ, he's setting up Christ as this great priest, and he goes and he puts blood on the mercy seat, and that's where our anchor has gone. It's latched on to the mercy seat because that's where Christ is gone, and it's immovable. Like it's a sure, steadfast anchor for the soul. It goes into the inner place behind the curtain. This is massive. This has massive theological implications because no one could go behind the curtain into the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle or the temple. This was the place that only the high priest could go, and he could only go once a year, and he had to bring blood. If he didn't do that, he could die because that's where God is. He's there above the mercy seat, and this is where Christ has gone.
Yeah.
And since Christ is there, our anchor is secure to the throne of grace, and he goes as the priest after the order of Melchizedek. So he brings it back around to this idea of this order of priest after Melchizedek, and we'll see some more of that next week.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's how sure our hope is. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be rocked back and forth by the storms of this world. It just means that no matter what happens down here, the anchor is going to hold, so we're not going to be shipwrecked.
That's good stuff. We went a little long today, George. Just a tiny bit.
Just
a little bit over 1 hour.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit over an hour. But that's good. That's really good stuff. So you're going to wrap it up next week?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly how we're going to do this. It's just not a good break because he goes talking about the priesthood through like chapter 10.
Yeah.
And it's just not a great break, but I'm trying to figure out. I wanted to get back to Melchizedek because he brings it up. He says, I want to talk about this more, but you're dull of hearing. He gives the warning, he gives the encouragement, and then he goes ahead and he brings it up because he's sure of better things. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where to stop. So
yeah,
we'll see.
So
I'm not sure exactly how far we're going to go in chapter 7, but we'll talk about Melchizedek, and then we'll take a summer break.
Well,
it'd be like the season finale, and then you gotta come back in the fall, and we'll pick up with Hebrews again.
Yeah, because we've got you got one more, and then we go into our summer kind of preaching schedule where all of the elders will preach twice. We're doing kind of 10. I don't know what distinctives is the right word. Maybe it's distinctive priorities about like what is our church about,
right?
Like the bedrock of our church. So we've got the priority of Scripture, the clarity of the gospel,
right?
Things like
biblical theology,
primacy of expository preaching,
church discipline, membership, leadership, things like that.
Yeah, kind of like the 9 marks, but we've got 10.
Because we're better than them.
We went plus. It's like 9 marks plus. Everybody's got Disney Plus.
We're 10 marks.
Paramount Plus.
We're 10 marks. You need to put out a book, Jay. 10 marks of a healthy church.
No, yeah, it's good. We've had so many new people at our church, and the church has grown a lot.
Well, I think
even through COVID. We've touched on all of these things early. So it's a good time to revisit.
Well, it's always good, even if we didn't have any new members. It's always good to be reminded, like, what are we about? Yeah. Because, all throughout Hebrews, we have to remember these things lest we drift away from them. And so it's good for us to be reminded of why do we do things the way that we do? Because we believe in the centrality of Scripture and the clarity of the gospel, and the best way to communicate that is through expository preaching and regenerate church membership and church discipline goes along with that, and we have biblical leadership, and it's good to be reminded of that. Even for me, it's good to be reminded because we get into we just kind of get into a regular flow. And we just kind of assume these things, and if we assume these things for too long, they'll get the assumption will get passed on to the younger people, and we just assume that they know this stuff, and they don't, and they've never been taught it. And it only takes, I mean, really, apostasy is only ever 1 or 2 generations away. So we have to constantly be reminding the people. We had Sunday school training yesterday, and the first thing that I brought up is look throughout the Old Testament and see how many times they tell the same stories over and over and over again. You get the Exodus event time and time again. It's because they're supposed to teach the next generation the stories. You can't just assume that they're going to know the stories. You have to explicitly tell them. If you don't, the world is going to teach them something. And if you're not teaching them something counter to it and superior to it, they're going to fall away.
So that's coming this summer. Then we'll take a break for Text Driven Tuesday, but we'll probably be able to still do the Free For All Fridays. Did we take a complete break last summer?
We did.
Or did we take a complete break in December?
I think we had a few that popped up here and there, but for the most part, we took kind of a break.
I think we'll do some, but we'll slow down. Like, we keep a pretty heavy pace.
Yeah, I mean, with the way things are going, things keep popping up. That we've got so many things that we can talk about.
How long does the briefing take a break for?
I think Mueller takes probably a summer. I think he probably takes 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you trying to compare us to the briefing?
Nah.
We might have slightly less listeners.
We go about 45 minutes longer than the briefing.
Right.
Probably because people that are more intelligent can say things in fewer words.
Right.
So it takes us an hour and 15.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, you want to shut it down for us?
You want me to shut it down?
I want you to shut it down.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, hopefully this has been beneficial for you as we've been going through Hebrews chapter 6. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the sermons and read back through the passage and think upon what the author is teaching us here, because we want to move past a shallow, immature Christianity. We want to hold on to the hope that we have in Christ. It's like a sure and steady anchor that is fastening us immovable to the throne of God. So be encouraged and think upon this hope this week. And as always, we want this to help you to become more and more conformed to Christ. So we will see you next time.